Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were up today, aided by increased demand for Chinese assets amid signs of progress in the US-China trade talks, and of course a pledge by Beijing to liberalize financial markets. Stocks, Nasdaq's up about 1.8% on the day, its best level in about 7 months, of course thanks to Tencent. In Nigeria, we saw oil firm Seplat and Nestle, key drivers on the NSE today, rising about 9% and 5% respectively. Now also coming up on the show. And the anti-stall system in the Boeing 737 MAX could have caused the Ethiopian plane crash in early March. And South Africa's rainbow dolls and the entrepreneurs behind them. Well, let's start off the show in the United Kingdom, which of course has been plunged into more political uncertainty. British lawmakers have rejected Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal for a third time this Friday.
The ayes to the right, 286. The noes to the left, 344. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock.
On Monday, this House will continue the process to see if there is a stable majority for a particular alternative version of our future relationship with the EU. Deal on the table, and today it has rejected approving the withdrawal agreement alone and continuing a process on the future. This government will continue to press the case for the orderly Brexit that the result of the referendum demands.
Well, the UK Parliament now plans to hold a series of votes on Monday in an attempt to find a new plan. Meanwhile, the European Council says EU leaders will meet on April 10th to discuss the UK's departure, and that a no-deal scenario on April 12th has become increasingly likely. Well, let's delve further into today's vote and, of course, its implications with CGTN's London correspondent, Richard Bestick. Richard, great to have you on the show. Now, of course, Theresa May's response to today's vote was pretty much the implications are grave moving forward. She also said, in quotes, "We are reaching the limits of this process." So, Richard, what next for her Brexit plan and certainly the whole process?
Well, the immediate challenge for the government is to unpick the confusion that now surrounds Brexit. That clip you played there of the Prime Minister was interesting because it seemed to be suggesting, when she said we're reaching the end of this process, that she might actually allow a vote on a general election. But then at the end of it, she went back to saying we will continue pressing for a withdrawal agreement that will take Britain out in an orderly fashion, meaning her agreement. The next event, if you like, was talked about by Theresa May there, and it is Monday, when all the options, the favourite options that were discussed earlier in the week when members of Parliament took over the Brexit agenda, will once again come back before Parliament. The reason they've got to come back was that actually all the 8 suggestions that were put forward to the House were rejected. They voted no on every occasion. So they're bringing back the ones that had the nearest to a majority, and that includes a customs union and of course a new referendum. That's an odd thing to happen.
Well, Richard, speaking of Brussels, the European Council President Donald Tusk, he's calling now for an emergency summit on April 10th. And he also said a no-deal Brexit is now a more likely scenario. So what do you expect we'll hear from the EU in terms of their next move?
Well, Michel Barnier, the Brexit chief negotiator for the EU, is in Poland, and he's been talking about a European free trade customs union and that Britain would be able to come into that. He's been talking also about other remedies, basically making the soft music overtures to the British. And those are the kind of issues that will be raised on the 10th. But bear in mind, Uche, that's just 2 days before Brexit, before Britain falls out of the European Union, crashes out with no agreement whatsoever, and what the Treasury in Britain and the Bank of England have both said would be catastrophic economic consequences. So they'll have to have something to go along to that meeting to save Britain from crashing out. The reality from Michel Barnier's point of view and Juncker's point of view is that, Donald Tusk's point of view, is that it's now looking more likely that Britain will have a no-deal Brexit.
Well, in the midst of all of this, Richard, opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn, he once again called for a general election. Is this third defeat of Prime Minister May's plan the end of the road for her?
I don't think Theresa May's given up on her Brexit deal, and I think the indications seem to be that she hasn't given up, and it's exasperating some members of the cabinet. You can hear from the noise behind me that there are those who would rather just get on with it and crash out whatever the drastic economic consequences. As for opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn, well, it's interesting that he should say that he wants a general election because his party's policy is, when they run out of road, is to go for another referendum. But getting a general election would be difficult. You'd need, because it's a fixed term parliament, you'd need something, you'd need 2/3 majority to get a general election. And it's very unlikely that many of the Tory MPs, the members of the ruling Conservative Party in Parliament, would want that. They wouldn't vote for it. Why? Because they wouldn't want to go into a general election with Theresa May as their leader.
Well, it's been certainly interesting. Many thanks, Richard, for that update. Of course, Richard Bestick joining us there in London. Well, the Brexit process is also being closely monitored here in Africa. Last year, UK Prime Minister Theresa May made her first visit to Africa to push for a number of post-Brexit deals. However, many of those deals have been left hanging and can only be activated once the UK takes a firm decision on its separation with the EU. Now, Sumitra Naidu takes a look at how South Africa is preparing for a Brexit.
South Africa has put together a number of scenarios in an effort to prepare accordingly, even if there is an exit without a deal.
The British have indicated that if that happens, there is a tariff, the tariffs they will apply themselves towards the rest of the world, and those are duty-free for everything except 469 lines, and that would mean for South African wine, fruit, and all kinds of vegetable-based products except for sugar, there would be no duties, so there would be no interruption in our trade for those products.
South Africa and the UK enjoy a solid trade relationship, and authorities here say they're not too concerned about Brexit as new deals will be negotiated. What is worrying, though, is ongoing investment. The UK is currently South Africa's largest source of foreign direct investment.
You're hoping that the UK doesn't suffer a lot through this Brexit issue, whichever what they decide to do. You're also hoping that if you decide to trade with another person, another country, that you're able to actually sell as much as possible. Unfortunately, some of the things that we sell have volatile prices and our earnings are hit, and that's why we have all these current account deficits.
The complications and difficulties that would arise would be in automotive products and components, where accumulation of inputs coming from the rest of the EU, from Britain, from us, all those issues would be extremely complicated and would be better solved if we could conclude our agreements.
Some experts believe a no-deal Brexit could be an advantage to countries negotiating new deals.
If the Brexit actually happens, they leave the EU, what will happen then is, the UK actually needs the world more than the world needs the UK. So you'll see there's a very interesting scenario where the UK would come to Nigeria, to Kenya and South Africa, for instance, as some of the biggest economies in Africa, to actually try and do deals there. So there's an opportunity there if you look at it as well, because then we could actually have win-win sort of trade agreements with the UK per se.
It's now wait and see. Smitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, Nigeria is also a key trading partner of the United Kingdom and the European Union. In Nigeria, CGTN's Deji Badmus takes a look at what Brexit, in whatever form, means for the nation.
Nigerians are following the Brexit debate, but not with a very keen interest. Most of the people I have spoken to here don't really understand what exactly the issue is and why it has continued to drag on. For those who understand and have been following the debate keenly, they do not think Britain should leave the EU and would want to see another referendum conducted. Now, in terms of how Nigeria and indeed the entire African continent may be affected by Brexit, some financial analysts think the country and the continent may be at the receiving end if it happens.
It depends on how the Brexit exit eventually ended, whether it's going to end with a no deal or with some level of agreement between Britain and the European Union. If it goes with no deal, if it ends with a no deal, and then you're going to see a situation where the European Union will take very drastic measures that work against Britain. Then we should also see a lot of shift by institutional investors away from London, which currently is the financial capital of Europe. So if that happens, you are going to see a situation where African economies will no longer, in the short term, be able to get the kind of funding, particularly portfolio investors that come from Britain to Africa. So you might see a situation where those investors will first of all focus on the European countries instead of focusing on Africa. Currently, the structure of most fund managers in Britain, many don't have funds earmarked for Africa. Should there be a drastic shift in their location, and they are now subject to new tax regime, which is favorable towards the European Union, you might see a shift from a lot of investment coming to Africa to maybe going to European Union countries and possibly to other emerging economies.
The jury is actually still out on how much impact Brexit could have on Nigeria and the continent. The business community is following the debate very keenly, but most governments in Africa have been silent, at least publicly, not weighing in on the debate. It appears they are just adopting a wait-and-see attitude on this whole Brexit drama. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, joining in on the Brexit conversation from Johannesburg is Jonathan Forster. He is the Dean and Director of Henley Business School in Africa. Very welcome to the show, Mr. Forster. Now, as Britain mulls over the grave implications of today's vote, how do you think the rest of the world, and particularly Africa, should be reacting to the reality that Britain could crash out of the EU without a deal?
Well, that is one of the possibilities, but we are far from that yet. You know, we've got up to April the 12th to make our decisions, as the other speakers have said. And the options are, you know, we either sort of have a general election in the UK or a referendum or the renegotiation or, you know, there's a new sort of negotiation that on the EU. So we're actually a long way from saying that there's a hard Brexit yet. But should that happen, then we've got some very interesting scenarios to look at. Firstly, if the Brexit causes the British economy to plunge, we've got a number of consequences on aid, on FDI, and also on British companies, on exchange rate possibilities as well, because it's the pound weakens, the South African rand will also possibly weaken. So that gives us some negative implications. Also the EPAs, the European EPAs that are in place now that are negotiated between the EU and South Africa, for example, of which at the moment the UK is part of, that will fall away immediately. There has been another negotiation with SADC in the meantime to allow that to kind of have a bridging capacity. But then Britain has got to negotiate, and South Africa and the other countries got to negotiate new agreements. That's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's very uncertain. However, I think there's great opportunities also. The British government will be extremely enthusiastic to forge new relationships very quickly. And in that eagerness to negotiate may come new opportunities for African countries to strike new deals. With the common agricultural policy falling away, for example, then some of the restraints on exports in the agricultural sector into the EU and to the UK will fall away, or to the UK anyway, and that will allow us perhaps to improve our agricultural exports. So there are a number of pros and cons in this, and I think we've got to be quite chilled about the whole process and not get too excited and start carefully to weigh the pros and cons and start to put in place some sensible negotiation ploys and really not to panic, because I don't think it is a panic scenario. The big winner potentially in this, of course, is China, because if confidence falls in the UK, then China will be able to pick up, with its sort of very large investment into Africa, will be able to pick up some of that slack. So I think we're seeing a really interesting game unfold. And we've still got a long way to go before we've got any form of resolution.
Quite right. But some experts actually see possible positive developments out of this Brexit vote today, especially for countries currently under EU sanctions, which of course were championed by Britain. What, for you, are some of the possible positives around Brexit?
Well, I personally am not too convinced that when Brexit happens, or if it happens, that those countries that are subject to sanctions will necessarily get a great boost. Those sanctions are there for a reason. Some of them are ethical and other reasons. I don't think there's going to be an immediate turnaround there on that. The British government is not going to feel it can, just for the sake of trade, be able to break some of those, what they would see as moral or other agreements. But on the other hand, I think the game is open. I mean, there is really very real opportunity here now for people with an entrepreneurial spirit to start engaging with the British government, who are also keen to strike deals. We've talked about agriculture before, and I know the previous speakers have talked specifically about some of the tariffs that may or may not be there. I think this is a really good time to build relationships with the new trade negotiators and the new companies in the UK, and to connect in with the British government, high commissions and the embassies in the various countries in Africa, and make it known that you're open for trade. And I think the British government will be keen to strike a new level, a new range of deals, even though they will have some constraints, because the default position under a hard Brexit is, of course, to go to the WTO rules, which everybody is bound to. So there is some time to negotiate. But I think it's a time for optimism as well, and negotiation, and those people who have the optimistic spirit and got the energy to find the opportunities in this will benefit.
Well, let's leave it there on that positive note. Unfortunately, we have to go. But many thanks for joining us, Mr. Forster. Of course, that was Jonathan Forster, Dean and Director of Henley Business School, joining us in Johannesburg. Meanwhile, the UK's membership in the European Union meant there were no customs checks to delay truckers as well as freight companies. But now the bigger challenge ahead is possible traffic delays between Great Britain and the European continent through the English Channel, should there be a no-deal Brexit going forward. Here's CGTN's Guang Xin reporting.
The 50-kilometer tunnel through the English Channel is Britain's only land link to mainland Europe. Millions of vehicles and tens of millions of people pass through the tunnel every year. At rush hour, a train passes every 3 minutes. Now, people worry that heavy traffic will be disrupted by a no-deal Brexit. Queues could become necessary at the border, as customs buildings will be set up to protect the single market and food safety standards.
For me, it's the death of England, that's for sure, even for the transporters, because the bosses aren't going to accept that we wait here for 7 hours for a 1-hour crossing.
The tunnel's operator is trying its best to keep vehicles moving. Eurotunnel has invested a lot in contingency measures. The new facilities include number plate readers and a color-coded road system.
Everything that we've done has been looking at smart border approaches. It's been trying to get technology into the process, trying to keep everything as smooth as we possibly can and not disrupt the flow we've got.
The company said that through a system of customs declarations pre-completed online, it will ensure traffic flows well after Brexit. Number plates of trucks arriving in France will be cross-checked automatically against the online forms. Customs officers expect the majority to be waved through, headed down a lane freshly painted with green markings. Those transporting live animals or those about which customs officers have suspicions will be subject to further checks. Send down a lane marked in orange.
We would love to have spent 15 million euros for nothing at all. But we've looked at it in a longer term. When is Brexit going to happen? Should have been tomorrow, might be the 12th of April, could be the 22nd of May. Who knows if there'll be an extension beyond that that's requested. So even if it happens on the 12th of April, if there's a deal, we go into a transition period where we're negotiating still the future trading arrangements. So we don't know, even on Brexit Day, whether this is needed or not. So we would rather be prepared for the worst whenever it happens. And if we have to think about using this stuff differently in the future, well, that's for another day in the long term.
Now that the lanes are painted, the technology installed, workers are granted a short break after EU leaders pushed back the Brexit deadline. But as Eurotunnel's director has said, many of them hope this work would never have to resume. Guanxin, CGTN.
Well, on that note, let's take a quick break now. Still to come on the show. The anti-stall system in the Boeing 737 MAX could have caused the Ethiopian plane crash in early March. And Parliament in Tunisia approves the country's entry to the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, investigators looking into the Boeing 737 MAX crash in Ethiopia have finally reached a preliminary conclusion that an anti-stall system was activated before the plane hit the ground. The Wall Street Journal cites people briefed on the matter, although the official report is not yet out. It is expected as early as next week. About 157 people in the crash are turning attention to the amount and quality of training that pilots flying the 737 MAX were taken through. There were 2 crashes of the 737 within 5 months. Now, the U.S. plane maker is also being sued by the family of Jackson Musoni, a citizen of Rwanda who died in the Ethiopian Airlines crash, at a federal court in Chicago. The lawsuit alleges that Boeing had defectively designed the automated flight control system. And staying with Boeing, a tour operator TUI has warned it will take a $225 million hit on its profit in 2019, and that's due to the grounding of Boeing's 737 MAX aircraft. Now, TUI said it was utilizing spare aircraft of its fleet, extending expiring leases for aircraft that were supposed to be replaced, as well as leasing in an additional aircraft to soften the blow to travelers. The group said it now expects underlying earnings before interest, tax and amortization to fall by 17%. This, of course, is after having previously expected it to be flat compared with the $1.32 billion generated in 2018. Well, let's head to Tunisia now, where the parliament has approved the country's entry to the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, or COMESA. The North African state's accession to the regional grouping is set to boost its exports towards the African market. CGTN's Anand Shaushi with the details.
138 MPs from the House of People's Representatives approved at a plenary session the draft organic law on Tunisia's accession to the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA.
Tunisia's accession to this regional grouping is likely to help boost exports towards the African market. Tunisian exports to this market do not surpass 2.5% of the overall exports.
The COMESA region carries a large market of the African continent, with a population of more than 503 million consumers and a total trade of $236 billion in 2016.
Joining COMESA will reinforce Tunisia's presence in the African market and reduce the export costs through the cancellation of custom fees currently applied on Tunisian exports towards COMESA countries.
According to analysts, Tunisia will have access to opportunities to market its goods and services in Eastern and Southern African countries' markets through the accession to COMESA.
Tunisian enterprises will take advantage of entering the huge COMESA market. Businessmen will be tempted to look for new partnerships and improve the competitiveness of domestic products and services.
The accession to COMESA will allow the automatic integration of Tunisia in the tripartite free exchange area that gathers some 27 African countries and 2 other economic groupings, namely the East Africa Community and the South Africa Development Community.
The president of the Finance Commission at the Tunisian Parliament said Tunisia will benefit from funding opportunities and insurance mechanisms and programs provided to members of COMESA through these groupings, special establishments. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's leather industry has been projected to generate over $1 billion by 2025, and that's according to a report by the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. The industry represents a major foreign exchange earner after oil. Total export of tanned skins amounted to about $240 million in 2015. While CGTN's Samson Omale visited one of the oldest and most famous tanneries in Nigeria to find out more.
Naragota village is a historical town in Jos that attracts tourists because of its leather and craft.
It was a kind of a family business, but now, right, for long it has not been really a family business. So many people come to learn from outside, not even just Nigeria. Some from Cameroon, Niger, as far as Burkina Faso. People came to learn. So I think they've came, learned, and left, which I'm sure they are doing perfect now with their businesses and their families too as well.
The Naragota village here in Jos, famous for its leather works, has a total population of over 20,000 people. And I'm told that in each household there are at least one tanner.
The manual production process used across small industry in the village makes the leather products unique and competitive.
We make shoes, bags, horse saddle, those were ancient things, this traditional dance attires and the rest. And now it has developed to body parts. We make body prosthetics that are even competing with the foreign ones.
There is some of my customers which I did not see them by face, but at times they are sending picture in WhatsApp, even pouring oneself. They used to send it for us. We will do it much better than the one that they send it for to us.
Nigeria currently boasts of some of the oldest tanneries on the African continent, but these tanneries are in dire need of modern production facilities.
We don't have modern machineries, right, in order to boost our production. That's from the tannery, right, to the finished product. In fact, we need machineries, modern machineries that can aid us in doing that. And you know, with machineries, within a very short time, you'll be able to produce as much as possible.
But leather entrepreneurs say with proper government policies and interventions, Nigeria can make leather its second highest foreign exchange earner. Samson Omale, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a quick break now. Still to come. Huawei defies tension with the US to post a rise in profit. And we take a look at why the clothes you are wearing could be contributing to the Earth's pollution.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now here's a recap of today's top headlines. The United Kingdom has been plunged into more political uncertainty after lawmakers rejected Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal for a third time. Parliament now plans to hold a series of votes on Monday in an attempt to find a new plan. Well, EU leaders will also meet on April 10th to discuss the UK's departure. The EU says that a no-deal scenario on April 12th has become increasingly likely. And investigators looking into the Boeing 737 MAX crash in Ethiopia have finally reached a preliminary conclusion that an anti-stall system was activated before the plane hit the ground. Well, the Wall Street Journal cites people briefed on the matter, although the official report is not yet out. It is expected as early as next week. And after weeks of flooding after a devastating cyclone, Mozambique is in the process of rebuilding and resettling hundreds of displaced citizens. Well, President Filipe Nyusi says the country is tackling the effects from one of its biggest natural disasters in its history. More than 700 people have been reported killed across 3 countries in Southeast Africa. And a new resolution from the United Nations to combat the financing of terror groups has now been adopted. Resolution 2462 is meant to curb innovative financing methods that have emerged from a global shift of terror networks. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, Chinese communications giant Huawei has reported higher sales despite tension with the United States. Revenue for the tech giant in 2018 hit a record of $106 billion. While CGTN's Li Jianhao visited Huawei's headquarters in Shenzhen.
Huawei once again under the spotlight. This time, good news for the Chinese tech company. Its revenue hit a new record.
The sales revenue rounded off at 721 billion yuan last year, over $106 billion, up by 19.5%. The compound growth rate over the past 5 years hit 26%. Our net profit reached 59 billion yuan last year, increasing by 25%.
However, Huawei has been in a difficult position over the past couple of months. Its planned 5G network rollout is restricted by Washington over concerns of the company's so-called ties with the Chinese government. The tech giant's founder took exception to the US decision in an interview with the BBC last month.
I object to what the US has done. This kind of politically motivated act is not acceptable. The US likes to sanction others whenever there's an issue. They'll use such methods. We object to this. But now that we've gone down this path, we'll let the courts settle it.
US authorities pledged to withhold intelligence from nations that continue to use Chinese telecom equipment, including Germany and the UK, but none have followed suit. Huawei earlier this month brought legal action against the US government for unconstitutional sales restrictions imposed by Congress, but the procedure could take years.
We once again make such a commitment. For any requirement for installing backdoors or collecting information for other countries from any government or organization will not be accepted by Huawei. I want to say that even the Chinese government wants to raise such a request. Huawei will reject it and will not be held accountable or bear the legal consequences. The criminal law of China doesn't allow it to happen.
Chinese Premier Li Keqiang also weighed in on the issue that the Chinese government is behind the company.
You ask whether the Chinese government will ask Chinese companies to spy on other countries. I don't know if you are referring to the governments or individuals of other countries, but let me tell you explicitly, this is not consistent with Chinese law. This is not how China behaves. We did not do that and will not do that in the future.
Meanwhile, Huawei held an IT day here in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi. The event gave valued customers a look at the company's latest ICT technology trends. The telecom firm plans to expand its presence here in Kenya for cutting-edge products and solutions to help in the country's digital transformation. CGTN's Astor Toll was there and brings us this report.
At Huawei's IT Day, participants got an in-depth look into the company's new product rollout.
Innovation was the word of the day, with Huawei showing off its capabilities, highlighting products such as the Dorado 6000, which allows companies, banks, and businesses, as well as governments, to store data faster and more efficiently.
The model goes up to the latest Dorado 18000.
And how it is better than other storage in the market is that the disk, flash disk, is manufactured by Huawei themselves. So which leads to a higher availability and durability. So it is known that Huawei's flash drives are much durable in comparison to the competitors. Like we offer like 3 million hours of durability.
Can you talk a bit about Huawei's growing influence and help in Africa?
Yes. So in terms of help from Huawei, that's what I was explaining during my presentation. One of the person was asking me a question like, can I buy the kit directly from Huawei? Yes, Huawei can do it, but it doesn't help the local business. So that's why we partner up with the local vendors to enable them and create an ecosystem.
For over 20 years, Huawei has been building an ecosystem in Africa. By showcasing new technologies, it strives to build the continent's capacity.
We roll them out to Africa as soon as we roll them out anywhere else in the world. So African companies can benefit and African countries can benefit, or governments can benefit, as much as any other government or company around the world.
Huawei, in the meantime, looks to continue to grow its footprint and establish partnerships in Africa. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, let's move on now. African cities like Nairobi, Cape Town and Lagos could be ahead of the game when it comes to digital innovation, but Kigali is catching up. Recently, a Lagos-based tech hub opened a design and innovation center in the Rwandan capital, while CGTN's Lonela Lupuwana caught up with the company's project manager, Tommy Jayola. Here are excerpts from their conversation.
So we are the research and development unit of Co-Creation Nigeria. Co-Creation Nigeria, the hub there is a technology innovation center. We deal with incubation of technology startups. We are a part of an arm of that, but we're mostly focused on research and development here. And so what that means is there's a multidisciplinary team of researchers, scientists, developers, engineers here. Our real main goal is incorporating human-centered design in how we solve problems.
And you've been running in Nigeria for about 8 years now. You've moved to Kigali in February.
Yes.
Why Kigali?
Kigali has really spent significant investments in making this place a very enabling environment for local and foreign technologists as well. And so for us, we're looking for a place to continue where we can deepen collaborations with stakeholders across sectors, but also, and very importantly, a place that will inspire creativity for the work that we do.
And you're working across different sectors. We're talking economy, we're talking health, we're talking education. We've got a lot of recurring problems within the continent. For instance, the Ebola keeps coming back. What are you doing to help?
A big part of our thematic area here is public health, and specifically digital epidemiology. And that is, how do we use data and technology to help with monitoring surveillance of diseases and infectious diseases in Africa, which is a problem. And so one of the ways we're doing that is we're developing a network of researchers, scientists, engineers, data scientists as well, coming together. And it's an African network, it's a Pan-African network. So it's how do we explore technology and data and improving how we monitor and monitoring and surveillance of these diseases, into also helping prevention of epidemics around the continent. And other projects that we're working on in health, with the, for instance, Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, we're developing a digital tool in improving adherence to treatment. So a lot of times, even like in tuberculosis, because of a lot of stigma, people don't finish their treatments, and we have the same relapse and the problem again. So part of our project, we're doing a medical trial right now for about 6 months, and our developers are working on the back end with the tool to keep improving it. And the goal again is to continue to spread those interventions to other parts of the continent as well.
I understand this wing of the Co-Creation Hub is fairly new, but let's look at your plans for Africa's education sector. What lies ahead?
For us in education, our goal is, how do we make STEM education attractive? Africa needs a lot of scientists and engineers, and people are slowly pulling away from that in schools. And so one of the ways we've done is through digital labs, where what we do is it's a gamified environment, so students are playing games, but they're learning content in science, biology, and chemistry. And the goal is, again, like I said, to improve interest in STEM education. Students are active participants of their own learning as well.
Meanwhile, the Solar Show Africa has drawn particular interest from South Africans wanting to reduce their reliance on a state electricity provider, Eskom. Of course, the country has been battling power shortages for more than 10 years now. It's had a huge impact on ordinary South Africans and their businesses. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with more.
The Solar Show Africa has come at a perfect time. South Africans were left incensed when controlled power cuts were implemented for several consecutive days last week.
People rush in to get the products. Within 1 week, 2 weeks, all our products sold out. So we need more to bring more, to import more from here. And I also see many people before they didn't do about solar business. Now they're all involved in solar.
We are very happy that load shedding is happening, because we're getting more clients coming to us, asking us for solutions. And with that, it has actually boosted us as well into changing our marketing strategy.
Eskom's rolling blackouts, which hit South Africa, have led to a huge spike in demand for solar panels and storage batteries, and many people at this show are looking for alternatives and ways to get off the grid.
This show is actually so beneficial, because looking at all the exhibitors here, most of them are assisting us with finding ways and means to combat this, I would call an illness we have in South Africa, because it has impacted us a great deal, in the business sense and also in the domestic sense.
We're actually looking for alternative from Eskom to solar system. While generators that are here, they can work, but the question would be for how long? And we are struggling as small businesses. We are actually at the verge where we feel that we might end up closing the company.
There are new and innovative solutions available, but moving off the national grid comes at a high price.
I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks for the solar industry is this lack of access to capital for businesses to go solar. And businesses in South Africa and the rest of Africa are suffering. Energy bills are accelerating very fast. They want to go solar, but they don't have the capital.
Eskom still supplies 90% of the country's electricity, mostly from coal-fired power stations. But there's plans to reduce this to 65% and include more renewable energy. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, plastics are considered the growing source of ocean pollution. Many countries across the globe have been banning items like plastic straws, cups, and paper bags to curb the global phenomenon. However, did you know that a large source of that plastic pollution comes from our clothing? CGTN's Karina Huber tells us more.
Columbia University researcher Bei-San Yen spent 3 years working on a study looking at the impact of tiny pieces of plastic known as microplastics on the water and marine life in rivers near New York City. What he found is microplastics act like a magnet for toxic materials.
In the samples we collected, we found out that PAH, which is called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, which is potent carcinogens and mutagens. We also find out that the pharmaceuticals was on the surface of the microplastics.
Those microplastics covered in toxins are then consumed by fish and other marine life, which can lead to various health issues.
You can affect the gill of the fish. And also another thing is when the fish eat those microplastics, they probably have some difficulty to expel them out. So they can stick inside the intestine of the fish for a longer time.
Plastic pollution is a global problem. A large source of that pollution comes from our clothing. Roughly 60% of what we wear is made of synthetic fabrics like polyester, lycra, and nylon, which are all made of plastic. When washed, those garments shed hundreds of thousands of plastic microfibers so small it's hard for water filters to catch them. Many end up in our waterways, consumed by marine life.
Scientists may be getting a clearer picture of the impact of microplastics on marine life, but there's very little data on how this impacts humans that eat the fish that consume these microplastics.
Scientists are concerned. Some environmental groups are calling on the apparel industry to come up with solutions. Clothing company Patagonia recently announced it's looking into making a textile that doesn't shed as much. It's also encouraging consumers to buy and wash less. But textile expert Preeti Gopinath says it will be a while before the industry as a whole takes action.
They should take it seriously, but usually companies tend to take things really seriously when it affects their bottom line somewhere.
Gopinath says many consumers like synthetics, and for good reason.
We are still on that high of, woohoo, we have a fabric that doesn't cost as much as silk, behaves quite like silk, and we're still marketing to that market that's looking for the affordability factor.
New York.
Well, let's shift focus now and take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices were up as OPEC-led supply cuts and U.S. sanctions against Iran and Venezuela put crude markets on track for their biggest quarterly rise since 2009. Meanwhile, gold prices heading for their worst month since August 2018, as of course we saw the dollar and equities rise today, while palladium bounced back after 3 straight sessions of sharp sell-offs. Let's take a quick break now. Here's a look at what's coming up. South Africa's rainbow dolls and the entrepreneurs behind them.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
the quest for diversity has inspired two South African women entrepreneurs to team up and create a collection of ethnic.
Kulili and Caroline are the creators of Sibahle collection.
What Caroline and I are trying to do is to build a lifestyle brand that's going to offer those kids that have been previously ignored by the toy industry before an opportunity to see themselves in the toys that they play with.
It is a tool that is going to guide a child and make them feel a certain type of way about themselves. So if they see beauty in that toy, in that tool, in that doll, whatever what you might want to call it, they see beauty within themselves.
Sibahle means we are beautiful in isiZulu, and the brand was born out of a need to encourage black children to be comfortable in their own skin.
They are very beautiful and they tell our stories, the African stories. Every child loves it because it relates to them. They look the same, the hairs, the color, everything about them.
We want to give voice to the previously marginalized, right? So we thought to add a doll with albinism. Our newest doll now is the doll with vitiligo. So we're not stopping there. There's still lots more to come from Sibahle collection. But the concept is really that of helping our kids of all races, to celebrate and embrace diversity.
Operating for only 2 years, the brand has gone global and can be bought online.
We have two main dolls. The big doll is about 50 centimeters in Nobuhle. She retails at 38 pounds, which is about $48. And then the smaller dolls are all 12-inch dolls, and they retail at 25 pounds, which is about $31. We are soon launching on Amazon.
Sibahle collection is changing mindsets about diversity and beauty, ensuring every child fits in. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And from a soldier to a baker, that's the story of a Nigerian military veteran who set up what's considered as the country's first mobile bakery in the city of Lagos. After almost 2 decades in the Nigerian army, Chukwuma Nebedum decided to venture into the bakery business and is now making a big deal out of it. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with his story.
Putting finishing touches to the mobile bakery. It's a first in Lagos and of course a first in Nigeria. Days later, and with everything in place, the truck is moved to a busy street in the city for the real deal. Chukwuma and his team get to work, baking bread from their mobile bakery right on the roadside. The initiative is that of retired soldier Chukwuma Nebedum, who says he learned baking simply by reading books, watching dozens of instructional videos on YouTube, and by practice.
I wanted to carve out a niche for myself because for me as an individual, I always want to do something different. I always want to be the first. If I'm not the first to do the quality, let me be the first to initiate something. So I just feel we're in a fast-moving world now, so I feel it's necessary. Everybody's running around trying to make ends meet, so people don't have time to also go to the brick-and-mortar shop to buy. So we tend to bring it to the customers.
And the customers are loving it. They're getting their bread hot and fresh. And for many, nothing beats that.
The fact that it's a mobile bakery was just caught my attention. I was like, and those that know me very well know I love bread, as in I eat bread. So I was like, okay, after church, I'll get bread. And the sample I've already had is nice. It's really like top notch.
It's really good. It's one of the best I've eaten in a while. So, and I think this is just milk bread or something. It's not coconut, it's not sardine, but you can eat this with a drink. As in, you don't actually need to add anything to it.
Yeah. At first, Chukwuma wasn't so sure his idea would really fly. But with the business now booming and people liking what they see and taste, he's seriously thinking of expansion.
As in, we hope maybe by the next 1 or 2, 3 years, we should have covered like 6 states. At the moment, so I look at maybe the 6th geopolitical zone. From there, we will move forward, and we are also welcome to people who are also trying to replicate this as a franchise. So, but one thing for sure that we take excellence as an habit.
Chukwuma spent 17 years in the Nigerian army. He says he hopes to spend much longer time as an entrepreneur and push the mobile bakery initiative across the continent.
Very satisfying when you see people coming to tell you that I love your bread. I've not eaten any bread like this. You can see the expression for customers who are telling us that wow, have we been all the while? Why have we not? So that is the motivation.
The motivation is indeed high for Chukwuma and his team of 6. They are revolutionizing the bakery industry in Nigeria. Dej Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, before we close the show, let's take a look at how Africa's currencies performed today. South Africa's rand firmer early on today. It was lifted by a spell of risk demand, of course, after economic growth in the United States slowed down. However, the currency remained poised for a drop as traders watched for Moody's decision on the country's ratings outlook. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling steady against the dollar with inflows from horticulture exports and NGOs matching demand from the energy sector. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and of course, the rest of the team, thanks for watching.